She never liked the back alley. It stank of wet rust and fried oil, and the shadows there stretched too long even in daylight. But that dog, he was always waiting. Square head, barrel chest, coat patched and scarred like an old war jacket. No collar, no leash, just Tank. Every morning, same place, same stare, like he had carved her into his memory and would not let go. Emily used to flinch. Now she froze. His eyes were not wild. They were worse, calm, calculating, like he knew her fear better than she did, like he was waiting for her to crack. Her breath came fast. The coffee cup in her hand shook once, then dropped, spilling warmth onto asphalt gone cold. Tank did not blink. He took one step forward. The world narrowed. Heart pounding, palms damp, something deep inside her snapped. She wanted to run, but then a scream, not hers, from inside the building. A crash, glass, a man's voice, sharp and ugly. Tank exploded toward the door.
Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update.
The alley wrapped behind the halfway house like a scar, always wet, always narrow, the kind of place that swallowed sound and memory. Emily kept her pace brisk, her bag tucked close, her eyes anywhere but on the shadows sprawled across the loading dock. But Tank was always there. His build was impossible to ignore. Broad, low, powerful, tan and white coat smeared with the kind of dirt that came from sleeping rough. The scar above his left eye pulled the skin tight when he blinked, giving him a permanent look of suspicion. But his eyes were quiet, not the kind of quiet that put you at ease, the kind that made you wonder what he had already seen. Emily hated that her breath hitched whenever she spotted him. Her co-workers joked about the block's beefiest stray like he was a cartoon. But to her, Tank was no joke. He was a threat with paws, and still, he never barked, never growled. Just stood alert, unmoving, as if he had a job. It was the fourth morning when she stopped pretending she did not see him. Her steps faltered. Bag slung over one shoulder, hoodie pulled tight, she stared back at him. Tank remained still. The rain had slicked his coat, flattening the fur along his spine. His breath was visible in the cold air, steady, calm. Emily whispered under her breath, a string of words she had not said in years. Not a prayer, not exactly. Just something close. Then she stepped forward. The sound was almost imperceptible, his weight shifting. That was all it took. Her fear surged hot and fast. She darted inside the metal door and slammed it behind her, heart thudding like a drum. She spent the day pretending to be fine, filing reports, answering emails, laughing too loud at a joke from the front desk volunteer. But all day, Tank sat behind her, eyes unmoving. When she left that evening, the alley was empty. She should have felt relief. Instead, her stomach twisted. The next morning, Tank was back. She did not run, she did not freeze. She stopped at the edge of the alley and waited. Tank stared. Then, after what felt like a full minute, he sat. That simple gesture, like he had given her permission, made something shift. Emily took 3 small steps forward. A scream shattered the silence. Sharp, male, close. She dropped her coffee. A crash followed the scream. Inside the halfway house, voices raised. Something overturned. Her brain struggled to catch up. Then Tank moved. No warning, no sound. He bolted straight for the door. Tank's body became a streak of muscle and speed. His claws scraped the concrete as he barreled past her. The metal door slammed open under the weight of his shoulder. Emily stood stunned. Her legs felt like stone, but her hands were already moving, pulling her phone from her pocket. She barely remembered dialing. The chaos inside was rising, voices overlapping, something metal crashing to the ground. A man was shouting. She recognized the voice, one of the residents, Derek. He had been volatile lately, quick to snap, pacing the hallways like a caged animal. But this was different, desperate, dangerous. The phone rang once, twice before someone on staff picked up. Emily did not wait. She gave a clipped report. Possible assault. Tank had entered the building. Someone needed to secure him. Her voice stayed surprisingly calm, but her heart would not stop punching her ribs. She dropped the call and sprinted for the door. The hallway was a mess of overturned chairs and echoes. A door at the far end stood half open, light spilling through it like a warning flare. From inside, more crashing. Then Tank's bark, deep, measured, not angry, assertive. Emily had never heard it that close before. It stopped her cold. She moved faster, arms tight at her sides. A small crowd had gathered near the main hallway junction, staff and residents drawn by the noise but too uncertain to act. Emily pushed through them. Inside the shared rec room, Derek stood with a chair lifted above his head. A second man, older and thinner, cowered near the wall, and Tank stood between them. His hackles were raised, but he did not snarl, he did not lunge. He simply faced Derek like a wall of muscle and instinct. Derek's chest heaved, he shifted his stance. His eyes flicked from the older man to the dog, his arms tensed. Tank barked again, this time louder, sharper. It echoed off the walls like a gunshot. The chair dropped, not in an act of surrender. Derek simply lost the will to hold it up. His arms shook. Eyes broke contact, and without a word he turned and shoved past the onlookers, disappearing down the hallway. The room went silent. The older man sagged against the wall, his hands trembling, and Tank turned his head slowly, just enough to look back at Emily. She realized her hands were clenched into fists. Tank moved toward the older man, but carefully, his ears lowered, his body relaxed. He sniffed the air near the man's hands and then sat again, just like in the alley, still, grounded. Present, Emily knelt beside the older man, asked his name, checked his breathing, called for backup. All the while, Tank sat in perfect stillness, eyes locked on her as if to say, now you see. That evening, after the reports and the paperwork and the exhausting silence in her apartment, Emily did something she never thought she would do. She bought a pack of turkey slices. The next morning, Tank was waiting, but this time she walked straight toward him, and he stood to meet her. The first time she fed him, she did not know what to expect. Emily stepped into the alley at dawn, turkey slices zipped inside a sandwich bag, breath visible in the morning chill. Tank was already there, sitting like a statue, tail curled around one side, head slightly tilted, watching. She paused halfway across the alley. Her pulse had not slowed, even after everything that happened the day before. That bark still echoed in her mind, that moment where he stepped into a fight and held the line like it was instinct. She pulled out the bag. Tank stood, her fingers tensed. She told herself not to flinch. He had not done anything threatening, not once, but years of fear did not unwind overnight. It clung to her ribs, subtle but insistent. She crouched and set the bag down. Tank took 3 slow steps forward. Cold, wet pavement soaked through the knees of her jeans. She did not move, just watched. He sniffed the bag, nosed it open, and delicately took a slice between his teeth. He sat again, chewed, looked up at her with those steady eyes. Emily released a breath she had not realized she was holding. That became their new routine. Each morning, before the building came to life, she would bring something small, sliced turkey, half an apple, a boiled egg, something. And each time Tank waited. He never rushed her, never barked, never demanded, he just received. Some mornings he would sit closer, others farther away, but always there, always present. The staff noticed. One morning, Rochelle from front desk leaned out the side window and raised an eyebrow. So you feeding the stray now? Emily shrugged and offered no explanation. She did not owe anyone one. She barely understood it herself. Tank became part of the rhythm, an unmoving piece of scenery that slowly took shape in her world. By the second week, he would meet her steps. A soft shuffle of paws across cracked concrete. No tail wag, no eager jumps, just presence. She had grown used to silence around him. It felt like a pact, a shared space where noise was unnecessary. But one afternoon, everything shifted. Emily was locking up the side entrance when she heard footsteps too fast to be casual. She turned. A teenage boy, no older than 16, tore around the corner of the alley, eyes wide, chest heaving. In his hand, something glinted. A blade, small, jagged, panic-held. He almost collided with her. Emily stumbled back, her bag fell. He raised the blade reflexively, not at her, just to ward off contact. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Then Tank was there, no sound, just speed. He placed himself between them, nose to chest, head low. The boy froze. Tank did not growl, did not bark. He simply stared. The boy's hand trembled. His chest heaved. Then something in him cracked. The blade clattered to the ground. He fell to his knees and buried his face in his hands. Emily stood frozen, one hand against the wall, the other against her sternum, like she could physically hold her heart in place. Someone called the authorities. Someone else called the house director. She barely remembered who. The boy's name was Marcus. He had been living 2 blocks over in a shelter that had recently lost power. He was scared, hungry. The blade was for show. Tank stood beside him until help arrived. Emily gave her statement, filled out the incident report, fielded too many questions from too many people. When it was done, she walked outside and sat on the edge of the loading dock. Tank lay at her feet. His body was warm against her boots. He did not look at her, did not seek reward. He simply existed beside her. That was the day she realized he had no owner, not officially, not on paper, but also not on the street. He belonged to the alley, to the halfway house, to her morning rhythm. That evening she searched online listings, lost dog forums, stray reports, nothing matched. No one was missing a square-jawed tan American bully with one ear that folded wrong and a scar across the left eye. He was his own. The next morning she bought him a collar, just a simple one, black, unmarked. She did not put it on him. She held it out and let him see it. Tank looked at it. Then at her, then he leaned forward and bumped her knee with his nose. She slipped it over his head with a breath caught between fear and wonder. That afternoon she found herself talking about him, to Rochelle, to clients, to the house director. They all had their theories, that he had been dumped, that he had been raised by someone tough, then abandoned, that he was trained and had forgotten the leash but not the purpose. Emily did not care about the theories. All she knew was that she was no longer afraid. Not of Tank and not of the echoes, because that was what fear had always been for her. Echoes, from childhood, from screams behind fences, from dog bites she never saw coming, from being told again and again dogs can smell fear, like that was her fault, like her blood made her guilty. But Tank never punished her fear. He met it, waited with it, let her bring the first move. That night she stayed late at work, finished her paperwork, organized a few client files, wrote a proposal she had been avoiding for weeks. When she stepped outside, the alley was darker than usual. She turned on her phone light and scanned the loading dock. Empty, her chest tightened. She waited, called once, nothing. The cold returned with teeth. She started walking toward her car, every step too quiet, the old fear stirring without reason. Then she heard him, a soft breath, behind the dumpster. She turned. Tank limped into view. His left paw hovered slightly off the ground. A smear of something dark streaked the concrete behind him. She did not think. She ran to him. He sat immediately, as if not wanting to alarm her. Blood, not a lot, but enough. She called the emergency vet, told them she was bringing a stray. They asked questions she could not fully answer. She wrapped him in a towel she kept in her trunk and settled him into the backseat. Tank did not resist. He looked at her once, that same quiet look. Then he lay down. At the vet, she sat on the floor beside the stainless steel table. They cleaned the wound, a gash along the paw pad, nothing deep, could have been glass, could have been a nail, she was not sure, but he had made it to her. That was the only thing she knew for certain. That night she brought him home, just for the night. A warm place to sleep, just one night. She told herself that, but Tank curled into the blanket on her living room floor like he had always belonged there. And when she woke up the next morning, he was still watching her, still waiting, still hers. Tank stayed, not just for one night, not just for a weekend. He stayed because he chose to. No leash, no locked door, no commands. He was free to leave at any time. But every morning Emily would open the back door and find him there, sitting by the old planter box, tail curled neatly, eyes bright, waiting. At first she told herself it was temporary. He was recovering. He needed space, a safe place, a quiet place. But the towel she used to dry his paws stayed hanging by the door. The food bowl she picked up from the discount bin stayed full each evening. His collar stayed hung on the hook next to her own coat. She stopped calling him the stray. She started calling him Tank. To her and slowly to others, he was not a visitor anymore. He was home. Emily had never shared her space before, not like this. No roommates, no live-in relationships. Her apartment was her shell, her shield, her controlled, quiet sanctuary. And yet Tank's presence changed nothing and everything. He did not beg, he did not bark, he did not demand walks at odd hours, he simply adapted. When she moved, he moved. When she needed quiet, he went still. When she was late returning from work, he would be at the door, head resting against the frame like he had measured the seconds. The first time she laughed aloud in her kitchen with him there, she startled herself. He blinked once and wagged his tail exactly twice. Small things began to return, sleep without medication, mornings without a weight on her chest. Nights when she could sit by the window sipping tea while Tank snored lightly beside the heater. Still, not everyone understood. One Saturday morning, she took him on a walk along the edge of the nearby industrial district. It was quiet, open, rarely crowded, a place with wide sidewalks and little foot traffic. Tank walked on her left, pace steady, head level. He sniffed at corners but stayed close. He ignored birds, bicycles, even a stray cat that darted across their path. But then came the man with the baby stroller. He slowed when he saw them, narrowed his eyes. That is a dangerous breed, he said, pulling the stroller to the far edge of the sidewalk. Should not be allowed near kids. Emily's spine went stiff. Her hand gripped the leash reflexively, even though Tank had not moved. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words clotted in her throat. The man passed. He never looked back. Tank sat down and looked up at her. She knelt beside him and ran her hand along his collar. "You are not the dangerous one," she whispered into the space between them. It happened again a week later, an older couple at the park. A teenager at the bus stop. Each time, the same cautious glances, the same wide steps around them, the same quiet judgment. Emily felt it more deeply than she expected, not just because of Tank, but because she had lived on the other end of that feeling too many times. The quiet wrongness, the suspicion, the label applied before the story was even known. She started to keep his lace short in public, not because he needed it, but because the world did. At home, she would sit on the floor beside him and trace the scar above his eye. She wondered what people would see if they knew the whole story. If they had seen him stand between Derek and the man in the rec room, if they had watched him freeze at the sight of a child's toy, or flinch slightly at the sound of fireworks, or walk in a perfect silent circle around a sleeping client during rounds. Tank had stories, and so did she. They just spoke them differently. One night, while sorting through paperwork on her couch, Emily came across an old notebook from years ago. It was filled with journal entries she had written during her therapy sessions. Raw, unfiltered, pages bleeding anxiety and self-doubt. On one of the pages, she had written the phrase, "Some fears protect you, others imprison you." She looked at Tank curled up beside her, and she realized something. He had never tried to fix her fear. He just refused to leave her alone with it. At work, people began asking about him, tentative at first, then more directly. Does he do any commands? Is he good with kids? How is he with other dogs? Emily answered honestly. Tank did not do tricks. He did not fetch. He tolerated other dogs if they gave him space. He ignored kids. Loud ones annoyed him. Gentle ones made him watchful, but he never reacted with aggression. One of the senior staff members suggested a behavior assessment. Just to be safe, they said. Emily agreed, not because she doubted him, but because she wanted to understand more. The evaluator came on a rainy afternoon. She stood tall, clipboard in hand, raincoat flapping, tone brisk. Tank greeted her by sitting in the middle of the courtyard and blinking. Emily watched from the side as the evaluator ran through her checklist. Sudden noises, fast movements, food distractions, leash tug, proximity to strangers. Tank passed them all. The evaluator frowned slightly at the end. He is very passive, not reactive at all, almost too calm. Could be fear suppression. Or trauma, hard to say. Emily smiled. Or maybe he just knows he does not have to prove anything anymore. That evening she let him off leash in the small fenced park behind her apartment complex. It was the first time since the injury. His gait was clean now, no limp. He ran once in a loose wide circle, not fast, not wild, just enough. Then he returned to her, no command, no cue, he simply came back. She rested her hand on the top of his head and watched the trees shift under the wind. There was still so much she did not know about him, where he came from, what shaped him, what he had endured before finding her. But one thing was becoming clear. Tank did not save her from her fear. He gave her the room to outgrow it. And in doing so, he had rewritten the story she had lived with for far too long. Not all dogs bite. Not all fear protects. Not all silence is weakness. Some dogs stand without barking. Some fears fade without war. And some bonds, the quiet ones, the ones without declarations or demands, those are the ones that remake you from the inside out. Autumn arrived like a whisper, soft and slow. The air turned brittle at the edges. Leaves curled inward before drifting to the ground. Morning light broke a little later each day. Tank adjusted with the weather. He spent more time in the sunlight that pooled near the sliding glass door. He lay on the rug with his chin on his paws, blinking slow and steady, as if measuring the day by how warm it felt across his fur. Emily adjusted too. She had grown used to the way he tracked her movements. From couch to sink, from bedroom to hallway, his gaze followed. Not intrusively, not like a dog desperate for attention, just quiet presence, quiet loyalty. She no longer noticed the exact moment her fear left. It did not break like a dam, it just faded like fog. The halfway house took notice too. Tank became a known quantity, a predictable calm. Residents who once stepped wide around him now greeted him by name. A few even brought treats. One older woman, Nora, knitted him a small scarf. He tolerated it exactly once before scratching it off with one dramatic paw swipe. Emily still laughed about that. Tank, however, remained unimpressed. But one day something shifted. It started with a look. Tank sat in the courtyard, head tilted slightly, ears half back. Emily had just finished a meeting. She stepped outside and found him there, waiting as usual, but his eyes were not on her. They were locked on the far fence. Nothing moved, no sound, no scent she could detect. Still, he stared. That night he paced more than usual, not anxiously, just present, watchful. Emily chalked it up to weather or maybe squirrels. But the feeling lingered. 2 days later, the break-in happened. The back window of the halfway house was smashed. 2 laptops stolen. No one hurt, but the damage rattled everyone. Tank had been outside. Emily found glass near the planter. His paw pads were fine this time, but his fur bristled when they approached the broken frame. She had never seen him like that, not growling, not snarling, just fully alert. Muscles tight, breath slow, body ready. After the police came and the report was filed, Tank would not settle. That night he curled near the door instead of on his rug. When she rose for water at 2 in the morning, she found him awake, ears turned toward the window. The next morning she went to the hardware store and bought a motion-activated light, the kind that flared like a siren when anything passed. She installed it just above the back door. Tank watched her work, not helping, not judging, just there. That evening, Emily brought out a blanket and sat beside him in the courtyard. She wrapped her legs and stared at the stars while Tank sniffed the edges of the fence. Then he settled beside her. No leash, no command, just him choosing again and again to stay close. The air smelled like cold earth and the sharp edge of dried leaves. She spoke to him for a long time that night, not about the break-in, about other things. The first dog she had feared, a terrier that had bitten her when she was 5, unprovoked. The aftermath, the bandages, the questions, the therapists who told her it was about control, not the bite. The partners who had told her to just get over it. The panic attacks she had hidden. Tank never looked away. When she finished, she pressed her hand to the top of his head. He blinked once. It was enough. The next week, a new resident arrived. A tall, lean young man with hands that never stopped moving. His name was Trey. He had been through 3 homes in 1 year, no family left. Just him, his backpack, and a note from the last director. Tank did not warm to him, not at first. He watched. Measured, when Trey approached too fast, Tank stepped aside. When Trey raised his voice in frustration, Tank slipped out of the room. When Trey cried in the hallway one night, Tank lay nearby, not touching, just listening. Emily noticed, Trey noticed too. One day he asked why the dog hated him. Emily told him the truth. He does not hate you, he just sees more than you think. Trey blinked, then said, me too. 2 weeks later, Emily found Trey and Tank sitting in the courtyard. Not touching, not talking, just there, side by side. It reminded her of herself. People came and went, but Tank stayed. He had become a fixture in the rhythm of the building. His food bowl rested near the back exit. His towel, now changed weekly, hung by the side door. His quiet patrols marked the shift change. His presence was never questioned. Then one morning he was not there. Emily opened the door. Nothing. No paw prints in the dirt, no scuffed leaves. She stepped outside, heart hammering. She called once, twice. No movement. Panic bloomed like ink. She checked the courtyard, the alley, the street beyond. Nothing. Hours passed. No sign. She called the local shelters, described him in detail, left her number everywhere. By sunset, her voice trembled. By midnight, her hands did too. Then at 2 in the morning, the motion light flared. Emily rushed to the door and flung it open. Tank stood there, wet and tired. Mud caked one side. A small cut traced his shoulder. She knelt immediately. Where were you? He nudged her arm once and walked inside. She cleaned the mud, dressed the scrape, wrapped him in towels. Then she saw it. Tucked into his collar was a thin piece of cardboard. A photo, a Polaroid, faded, water-damaged, blurry, but it was him, younger, leaner, next to a man, no name, no note. Just the photo. Tank lay down and sighed. Emily sat beside him and stared at the image. There were pieces of him she would never know, chapters of his story that belonged only to him, but he always came back. That was what mattered. Some dogs are not meant to be kept. They are meant to be trusted. And Tank had earned his name in more ways than one. Unshakable, silent, built for the long haul. The kind of dog who watched the door even when no one asked him to. The kind of dog who never barked unless it mattered. The kind of dog who, once he chose you, stayed. Winter came without warning. One day the wind carried leaves across the alley, and the next, frost settled into the cracks of the sidewalk like it had always belonged. The cold thickened the air, slowing footsteps, quieting the streets. People moved faster between buildings, hoods up, collars high. Tank moved slower too, not because of age or pain. He still rose early, still made his quiet rounds. Still followed Emily to the gate each morning, watching until she disappeared around the corner. But his movements were more measured now, intentional. He had grown into the building's rhythm completely. Not just as a fixture, but as a part of its fabric. The residents called him Tank in passing, in gratitude, in greeting. Some asked to walk him. Emily allowed it with quiet rules and even quieter pride. He remained gentle with the quiet ones, watchful with the loud. He stayed near the kitchen during stormy nights, lying on the warm tile while lightning struck somewhere beyond the parking lot. Emily sometimes watched him from the office window. And she wondered what it would feel like when he was no longer there, not from worry, not from dread, but because that was the thing about love she had only just learned. It made you plan for absence, even when it was not yet near. Tank had begun limping again, a soft, subtle hitch in the back right leg, nothing pronounced, but she noticed. The vet confirmed mild arthritis, nothing serious, just age beginning to speak. He still walked, still climbed stairs. Still met her at the back door with that look that said everything without a word. But some mornings he stayed on the rug longer. Some evenings he slept deeper, waking slower. Emily adjusted. She bought him a new bed, a thick one made for joint support. He ignored it for 2 nights before curling into it like it had always been his. She added supplements to his food, took shorter walks, rubbed his shoulders more often. Tank did not seem to mind. What mattered, he reminded her again and again, was not the pace, it was the presence. One morning, Trey knocked on her office door. He asked if he could take Tank for a walk, just the small loop near the river path. He had a job interview in an hour and felt like he needed a little luck. Emily hesitated, but Tank stood beside Trey with his tail low and easy, and she nodded. They returned 40 minutes later. Tank's gait was easy, Trey's eyes were bright. He got the job. Tank, of course, received the first high five. Later that week, an older client named Paul stopped Emily on the stairs. He asked if Tank could be present during his next intake meeting, just sitting nearby, just being there. He makes the room feel like it breathes, Paul said. Emily said yes. She sat beside Tank that night and ran her fingers through the short fur along his back. You are making more of a difference than most people ever will. He sighed and rested his head in her lap. A month passed, then 2. Snow arrived in a single night, covering everything in quiet. The halfway house buzzed with seasonal tension. The holidays always brought an edge, family absence, recovery pressure. The calendar carried weight for many. Tank absorbed it. He made no sound, but he adjusted. He lay beside new arrivals. He kept near the stairs when the nights grew loud. Emily spent one night sleeping on the office couch. When she woke, Tank was curled in the doorway, blocking the draft. Then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. A woman stood outside, late 50s, faint resemblance to the man in the photograph Emily kept in her drawer. She held a folded envelope. Her voice was calm but strained. She asked about the dog. Emily listened. The man in the photo had been her brother, a veteran. He had passed away almost 3 years ago. Tank had been his service animal. No chip, no registration, just trust. He had gone missing during a move. The woman had looked for a week. Then longer, then assumed the worst. Emily told her everything, slowly, carefully. The woman listened, touched the envelope, then handed it over. It contained a second photo, Tank and the man on a wooden porch, a handwritten note, "If he finds you, let him stay." Emily stared at it, then looked at Tank, then handed the photo back. "I think he already did," she said. The woman nodded. She did not ask for him back. She knelt and placed her hand on his head. He leaned into it like he remembered. Then she left. No tears, no drama, just closure. Emily cried that night, not because she feared losing him, but because part of him would always belong to someone else, and that part had found its way home. Spring returned. Slowly, reluctantly, as if unsure it was still welcome, Tank's limp remained but manageable. He still greeted her at the door, still patrolled the edge of the yard, still watched the hallway as clients came and went. He did not do much more, but he did not need to. His being was enough. One morning, Emily stepped outside and found him lying in the early sun, eyes half closed, ears twitching. He opened one eye as she approached and gave the softest, briefest thump of his tail. She sat beside him and whispered his name. Tank, no response, not because he did not hear, because he did not need to move. Everything had been said already. He stayed until the very end. When that time came, it was quiet, in his sleep, on his rug, warm, peaceful. Emily sat with him for a long time. She did not rush the grief. She did not try to contain it. She simply let it arrive. Tank had taught her that too, presence over performance, stillness over noise. That afternoon, she placed his collar on the hook by the door. She did not remove his towel or his food bowl. The residents built a small memorial near the planter box. Photos, notes, one drawn in crayon, a scarf someone had re-knitted. She added the Polaroid, taped gently to the back window. Time passed. The house carried on. Emily still walked in the early mornings, sometimes alone, sometimes beside a new resident who needed silence more than advice. She kept the door open, always, Because one day, another dog might find his way through, but no matter how many years passed, or how many dogs came and went, there would never be another Tank. He was not the one who healed her. He was the one who gave her the space to do it herself, and that made all the difference.
Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.